Okay, well, I'm happy to be here, and my goal in this next hour is to make you smarter than 95% of the people on artificial intelligence. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and hopefully it will be enjoyable and memorable. In any presentation I do, I've always been taught that if people come away with three things from the presentation, then they've probably got about as much out of something as there is to get. So I'm going to give you three things to be paying attention for. Three words: organic, digital, and large. So watch for those words as we go through the presentation.
You could make that thing, if you click OK, you can make that go away.
How about if I just leave it there? I'm at a point now where I don't want to risk anything. This whole thing started back in 1673 with René Descartes saying, "I think, therefore I am." And so that was the beginning of this concept of intelligence. Also, a more recent prophet said, "The future ain't what it used to be," Yogi Berra. And that also is right on. And then all the way back to smoke signal days, we've always had trouble with new communication technologies and adults and kids not always being on the same page. So let's go to the definition of artificial intelligence. An artificial is made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally as a copy of something natural. That doesn't really do a lot for me, but that's it. Intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And it comes in a lot of different ways. There's practical, creative, analytical. Then we have IQ, intelligence quotients, emotional quotients, social quotients, and adversity quotients. We also have a hierarchy of intelligence. When we start out with at the bottom with measurements, facts, data, information, and now up at knowledge, this is where the new artificial intelligence level is coming in at the knowledge level, not yet at the wisdom level. But before we get into the artificial intelligence, I want to give you a little appreciation of organic intelligence, what I call wetware. And that is distinguished from digital intelligence that includes software and hardware. Now, wetware is basically your brain. And we have senses that are inputs. We have a physical structure that's similar to hardware. We have mind processing that's similar to software. And we have something that the digital doesn't have: consciousness, self-awareness, ego, or soul, however you want to describe that. The development of our wetware has taken a considerable length of time. Basically, taste developed about 2 billion years ago. Sight, 570 million years ago. Smell, 500 million. Hearing, 370 to 275 million. So we have been a long way in the process of evolution and developing this wonderful package that works up here. Now, some of the other challenges: it takes 9 months of gestation, about 21 years to mature and get training. We have 60 to 70 years of functionality, but then we have a total memory loss on our departure from this world. In terms of our sensitivity of our senses, we're rather limited in that our visual sensitivity is that very narrow line between ultraviolet and infrared. Our audio sensitivity is the line down below, and you can see that other animals like elephants and dogs, cats, and dolphins have a much wider range of sensitivity. So we have some limitations in our senses. The brain itself is about 3.3 pounds. It works on electrical, chemical operation through synapses. Its processing speed is pretty slow at 60 bits per second, but it does a parallel processing, which means it can do a whole bunch of different things at the same time. And that's what gives us a lot of the power that we have. We have about 2.5 million gigabytes of storage space, and that compares to the IRS database of only 150,000 gigabytes. So we have 17 times the storage space as the IRS database. That's pretty impressive. We work on about 350 to 450 calories per day. A chess champion in a serious match can burn 1,000 to 1,500 calories. So the mind is a muscle that takes calories, and if you're thinking hard, you can lose weight. I've been trying to do that, but it's not too successful yet. Overall, we use about 1,700 watts a day, which is the equivalent of a 40-watt light bulb. So our electrical consumption is very, very low. And neurogenesis, it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. So keep thinking. Right now I'm going to start talking about digital, but back on organic, just for my last statement. Within the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be a new technology that comes out that hasn't really even been named yet, but let's call it biocomputing. And that will be basically growing brains, just like they're beginning to learn how to grow kidneys and artificial hearts and things like that. The power of that is almost beyond comprehension. They have demonstrated that 1 gram of DNA can store 250 petabytes of information that works out to be 100 million CD movies, DVDs. Now, today I was playing with Gemini, one of the chat bots, because I'm trying to get my head around how much is 100 million CDs. That's a number so big, I just can't fathom it. Well, according to Gemini, if you took the CDs out of the boxes and stacked them up, the CDs would be a stack 100 miles high. Now, to put that in our local perspective, if I take that 100-mile stack, lay it down, I can have a trail of CDs to Olympia and halfway back. Now, that's what 1 gram of DNA, 1 gram is the sweet and low in this packet. 1 gram of DNA would fit in this packet and equal 100 million CDs. So that's going to be some of the power of biocomputing that will make digital computing look like the young kid. Okay, the other key point I want to bring out is technology is agnostic. It really doesn't care. It's the people who use it that determine whether it's used for good or bad. And so that's where we have to look at. Now, here's one. This is called the Gartner Hype Cycle, and it applies to almost any technology. And you have an innovation trigger that's over on the far left, and then this line going up. This is called the peak of inflated expectations. Inflated expectations. Now, this chart was done, oh, I should have, yeah, well, in 2022. So 2 years ago. Clear over on the left where that big arrow is artificial general intelligence. And it was coded to say more than 10 years out. 2 years ago. This year, that chart's been redone, and artificial general intelligence is up here at the top. It is about to go over into the trough of disillusion. So in the last year, we've had inflated expectations, and we are about now to drop into the trough of disillusionment, where all those things that we thought were going to happen probably aren't for a lot of different reasons. And then after that, it goes on up. The other point I want to get across is human mental capacity. Our wonderful 3.3-pound brain up here isn't getting any better. I'm not going to be 10% better next year. I'll be lucky to break even. But we, as ability to think as humans, has been flatlined for 100,000 years or so. What we live in is a world of what usually we look at as linear growth, of things that grow at 5% or 7% or what, some percentage. What we do not appreciate is exponential growth. And exponential growth is the curve that jumps up. And this is what technology is all about. I had 25 years in the semiconductor industry and lived with exponential growth. So I've seen a lot of it. I have some understandings of it. But let me give you an example. When they were sequencing the human chromosome, it was a 14-year project. They were 7 years into the project, and they had sequenced 1%. Now you got 7 years left, and somebody asks you, well, do you think they're going to make it in time? And most would have said, of course not. But you need one other piece of information. They were doubling what they could do every year. Now, if you're at 1%, you have 7 years left to go. What does that look like? Well, year one, you're at 2%. Year two at 4, year 3 at 8, year 4 at 16, year 5, you're at 32%, year 6, you're at 64%, and guess what? In year 7, you cross 100%. And that's exactly what they did. So that is exponential growth, and it's tough to get your head around it. The other way to look at it is it took 16 years for mobile phones to reach 100 million users. It took 4.5 years for Facebook to reach 100 million users. It took 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million users. So that's exponential growth as well. This is an example over a little under a 2-year period of time of the improvement in image generation of one of the softwares. And you can see 2 years ago, it was a pretty crude figure of Harry Potter. And up till now, it's a much improved one. And now it's even more photorealistic. So that's how fast these changes are happening. This is a graph that shows artificial intelligence versus human performance benchmarks. And the problem over the last couple of years is that artificial intelligence now exceeds all of the human benchmarks. And so brand new benchmarks are having to be developed to measure how fast it's improving. This chart actually goes back 15 years to Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. And he made a bunch of projections 15 years ago. And I recalibrated them with a blue arrow there. And projections he made 15 years ago of the growth in supercomputer power are absolutely right on. And he's got a new book out called The Singularity is Nearer that I would encourage you to read. The same is, this is the amount of computer memory that $1,000 will buy. And roughly, we're getting very close to one human brain, the equivalent computational power you can buy for $1,000. By 2050, you can buy one that will have the computational power of all the human brains in the world, 8 billion. Okay, types of artificial intelligence, three types. There's the narrow, and that's basically, it just performs a specific task. Virtually everything that is done today is under the category of narrow artificial intelligence. What we're debating is when we will get to general artificial intelligence. And some people say we're there. Ray Kurzweil says it's going to be 2029. I'll bet on Ray. And that's an ability to learn, understand, and function as a human. Its multifunctional capabilities equal that of a human. After that, then comes super intelligence. And that then is exceedingly better at everything. And this is the singularity that Ray Kurzweil talks about of when man and the digital computer will start to merge. And he predicts 2045 for that. And it's going to be hard to tell when we believe that artificial intelligence is sentient. And because we already do it with things, we look at the sea and we talk about Neptune. We have totem poles that indigenous people feel represent the native spirit. So we have a tendency to see humanity in a lot of things already. So it's going to be tough to see that. And particularly there's things like the Japanese care robots that these are as valuable as their children as far as the relationships. Now, what is AI? AI is made up of four different things. One is cloud computer servers, these big warehouses of computer boards, large language models. I'll talk more about each of these. Machine learning, and the internet that connects all of these things. And here's some perspectives of how it's been changing over time. Back in 1997, you may remember chess champion Garry Kasparov that finally was beaten by a computer a long time ago. Well, that had a difficulty of 10 to the 123rd. So that's 10 with 123 zeros behind it in terms of the complexity of a chess match. Then in 2011, Jeopardy beat Ken Jennings and the champions of that. And that was a more impressive thing because now you're using natural language and talking about things. You're not just moving things around a board. But then in 2016, the leading person in the game of Go was beaten. Now, we don't know much about Go, but in Asia, this is huge. This is the game. And the complexity of that is 10 to 360 zeros out behind it. Far more complex. And I'd say that was kind of the end of narrow intelligence, and then general intelligence is starting to kick in. And the game of diplomacy in 2022, that's where 7 players, they're online, so they just type messages to each other. They don't talk to each other. But it really models a World War I strategy in Europe. And basically you lie, cheat, steal, and do whatever thing normal diplomats do to win this war. The Cicero Facebook artificial intelligence bot consistently beat these people, and they had no idea that they were playing against a computer. And one of its main strategies, it was honest. It did what it said it was going to do. So then another one, Stratego, it is also showing that computers can match human strategy and thinking. Now, these are large language models. And they have now gone, they're getting close to being 1 trillion tokens in size. These are scraping every bit of information that's ever been put online, that's been in books, that's in movies, is put into these things. it takes 5 to 6 months for ChatGPT-4 to run one of these training models at about $150 million to create this model. So you have got basically all of the information in the world in a cataloged format that can be searched and manipulated. So that's what a large, and notice large, that's one of the highlighted words up there, language models. The growth of them has been incredible. This is an exponential growth line. They're now heading over 1 trillion tokens. So they've gotten bigger and bigger. And as they get bigger, they tend to get better. Now, this is machine learning. It's the third part of the 4. Machine learning is not unlike what we do in that I was a big fan of unsupervised learning when I was a teenager. I smoked in the 8th grade and gave that up, but that's unsupervised learning. It's out there picking up stuff on its own. Supervised learning is when you go to school and somebody now has given you a organized set of information and has a systematic way of presenting it to you. Reinforced learning is where you go out and you take a step and you fall on your face and you realize that wasn't quite the way to do it. And the next time you take a step, you're a little smarter about how you do it. And then you learn to walk and talk and do all those kinds of things. So that's reinforcement learning. Now, interestingly, in the machine that beat the Go master, that was all that was used. They put in to the bot the rules of Go, which are very simple, and the objective to win. And it then proceeded to play against itself billions of times. And in that, it learned moves that have never been seen before, and to this day are not quite understood of why it did what it did. So that's just pure learning on its own. So cloud computers, the servers, the warehouses that handle them, the large language models, the machine learning that then works with the large language models to organize the data so that it can access it, and then the internet that allows it to communicate. So now we're into the battle of the titans. The big kids are coming into play. Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple are now going after artificial intelligence. This is the capital spending on AI development. As of last quarter, the quarterly spending by those 4 companies was $53 billion in 1 quarter. Over the last several years, venture capital invested a high of $125 billion, and they're currently investing at about $55 billion. Massive numbers, and those numbers are going to drive an awful lot of product development. Growth of data centers from 2020 to 2024, they've gone from about 500 data centers to 1,000 data centers. That's these big warehouses with all the computers in them. The revenue of NVIDIA, who's a company you've probably heard of, it's now worth over $1 trillion capital value. And its quarterly revenues is $30 billion now. And that's up over the last 5 years from like 8 billion. And that is one huge growth.
What are they selling?
Great question. Thank you. What are they selling? They are selling the chips that go in to the server farms, and they have like 80% of that market. So they own it, and they're doing well. And believe me, there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to take that away from them. So this will not continue to go up like that. I can guarantee that. ChatGPT-3 is what we're using now. 4 is being introduced right now. It's a generative pre-trained transformer. Generative means that it can come up with new ideas. Pre-trained means that it's got this large language model behind it. Transformer is literally a neural network, in that when it looks at words, it tries to statistically predict what the next word is. And the example is that if a train leaves the station on time. Okay, it looks at the word station. Now that could be a radio station. It could be an international space station. It could be a train station. And it will pick up now, and when it sees the next word, train, now the other 2 stations drop up, and this goes up higher. And particularly when it sees on time, is it likely that train, station, and on time will be put together? And so it builds then this lattice that allows it to predict what the next words are and to have some understanding of what those words are and the context that they're used. Anyway, it was done on both supervised and reinforcement learning. As I had said, it took, well, this is a different example, 10 months for Facebook to reach 1 million. It took 5 days for ChatGPT to reach 1 million. Now, this was a fun one. And DALL-E is OpenAI's image generator. And it's a play on, I don't know if you remember WALL-E. WALL-E was a movie of this little robot that ran around, and Salvador Dali. So it's a combination of those 2. Now, I was doing a presentation on cryptocurrencies and I wanted an image. And so I put in a Bitcoin miner named Electrostatic, and that's what it gave me, which blew my mind because it's done in the same style of the Bored Ape Yacht Club non-fundable tokens, which were selling for $150,000 at that time. I missed that market, but anyway, it was amazing. Then I had another one I was doing for Heron's Key, and I put in blue heron with a key next to a harbor, style of Van Gogh. And in about 5 seconds, this is what I got. Images that have never been created before. They were created strictly on the prompts that I gave to it. Okay, now where is artificial intelligence going? 2 of the big areas is going to be in medicine and education. It will absolutely transform these areas. In medicine, there was, up until 2 years ago, let's see, there was roughly 1 million proteins had been identified and worked out. And now, through Google AlphaFold, over 200 million proteins have been identified and cataloged. That's nearly all the proteins known to science. On top of that, they've released this database as an open source to more than 1 million scientists in 190 countries in the world for free. It's easy to use, and basically it's an undreamed of tool that suddenly 100 scientists have to start developing drugs and vaccines and things like that across the world. SynthSR is a way to take regular brain scans and combine them to what's called a T1 weighted image, which is a much higher resolution. This kind of tool is going to dramatically expand our ability to understand how the brain works. And they're making huge steps almost every week in understanding the patterns and how thoughts and emotions and things like that cascade through the chemical and mechanical and electrical wiring of the brain. 139 medical devices based on AI were approved in 2022. Dramatic increase, and we're going to see this ramp up even higher. So more and more devices will use this tremendous power and apply it to improving medicine. As far as education, digital intelligence, there's another one of those highlighted words. The horse is out of the barn. A year and a half, 2 years ago, people said, a lot of faculty and things said, oh, we're not going to allow this. Hey, it's done. It's out. You'd better figure out how you're going to use it and how you're going to adapt to it. A recent article that the kids that are using it in high school, 83% of the parents have no idea they're using it. But they're using it for basically learning how to think better. So it's not being used so much to cheat. It's being used in a productive manner. One of the leaders in this is the Khan Academy. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Khan Academy. I've followed them for 10 or 15 years now. They educate about 10 million people at any given time. It's free. There are several thousand videos online that teach everything from 1+1 to linear algebra. It is an amazing resource. And they've developed with ChatGPT-4 something called Khanmigo, which is they call it a wired garden because the child is in a protected area in the computer, and they have their own personal tutor. And the tutor uses the Socratic method. So the tutor will never give them an answer, but it will pose questions that allow them to find the answer themselves. You can have conversations with historical figures. You could have a conversation with Aristotle, because all of his works have been scraped up into the large language model, and it can put them together much the way he would say them. It's self-paced, infinitely patient, and it gives feedback to the parents and teachers on what the student is doing. I had a thing here, and we'll just see if it works. But
hi everyone, Sal Khan here, and I'm excited to announce that Khanmigo, our generative AI-powered tutor on Khan Academy, is now generally available. And this is especially powerful as we go into back to school, that if you have Khanmigo, your student has it on their Khan Academy account, that they are going to be fully supported. They can ask questions not just on their Khan Academy work, about anything that they see in their schoolwork. But it will not cheat, it will not do their homework for them, but it will provide support like a great tutor would. But it goes beyond what a traditional tutor would do. My background's in computer science, and using this with my own kids, I found it to be a better programming tutor than I can be. It also does things like academic coaching. It can actually give feedback on students' college essays. It can simulate historical characters. It can simulate literary characters. It can do creative exercises with the student where they could write a story together and your student could even talk to the characters in the story. Now, as a not-for-profit, our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. But we are having to charge for Khanmigo. It is $9 a month. And we have to charge that because the computation costs of generative AI are actually quite expensive. And this is an experience, I want to be very clear, it's built off of the cutting edge AI technology. We're not skimping on any dimension of the quality. I think people are surprised by the quality of the math and how much we've been able to reduce some of the rough spots that generative AI has historically had. The guardrails that we've put in, not only does it not cheat, but you as a parent, if your student's under 18, can monitor what's going on, can be actively notified if anything suspicious is going on. So if you want to help support your student this coming school year in their academics and beyond, think about getting Khanmigo for them.
Also, as I said, you can speak with historical figures. I've had a conversation with Socrates. It was kind of interesting. And if you want to ask him about a point of what he thought about this or that, then you can put it into the prompt line, and in about 3 seconds, you get a response back. So a huge thing as far as asking Mozart, what was he thinking when he wrote this or that, or why did he do it this way? Also, we're getting very close to be able to understand what animals are saying. I'm not saying we're going to be talking with them because they use a different thought process and things, but we're beginning to unlock the systems of how they talk to each other. And we already have some ideas of how crows teach their young different things. University of Washington over here is probably one of the leaders in crow intelligence, if you will.
Yeah, and also they recently had the whales.
And the whales, absolutely. So I think this will be revolutionary when we begin to appreciate that many species communicate and have feelings and care about things. I think it's going to change the way we look at an awful lot of the world. Now, what's the Achilles heel of artificial intelligence? For last year, we were all worried it was going to take over the world and it would be the end of us. Well, now we're hitting down that curve, that trough of a disillusionment. The reality of the world starting to catch up with us. Costs, it's expensive. $50 billion a quarter they're spending on this. And guess what? There's no revenue model. They're not making any money on this right now. They haven't figured out how to make money on it. And by the way, it took Google 2 years to figure out how to make money on search engines. Once they did, it was out of the park. But that's an awful lot of money being dumped into something on the belief that someday you're going to be able to make money back on it. And I think that's where some hard reality is going to start to set in pretty soon. Server farms and electricity. Article this morning. 3 Mile Island is being brought back up over the next 4 years for one customer, Microsoft. 20-year contract for all the power they can produce. So that's what's going on. And then under no revenue model, I've got incest post 2022. Up till July of 2022, all this information that was being scraped off the web and everything else to go in the large language model had been created by humans. But this was when AI started to create information and put it on the web. So now it is literally contaminating the human information that is out there. And so there's a real concern of something called model collapse. When most of your information comes from you, it's no good anymore. So that's a big problem that's coming at them that they are working on. Copyright. They went out and took everything in and then got sued for a whole bunch of stuff that was copyrighted. So now they're trying to figure out how to get the copyright stuff out of there. Bias. It's clear that the information that you take from humans is clearly biased because humans are biased. And so this transfers on into the computer system. And they're trying now to figure out how do you remove bias so that when you show a doctor that they're all not white males, that you actually show some other people. And hallucinations, AI will give you an answer, whether it really knows anything or not. It will put together a bunch of words that may sound reasonable, but in fact are totally wrong. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. And then regulations are starting to come in. Here's the AI-related regulations that were passed in the United States. In 2023, we had 25 new regulations. So the governments have finally woken up to the fact, hey, this could be serious. We'd better do something about it. And that was a worry I had 2 years ago. Nobody was paying attention to this, and now they're paying attention to it. And so this can only be good. As we get more eyes on it, we start looking at what kind of problems could it solve and how can we stop them. And this is the AI-related bills passed by various countries, 23 by the United States. The EU is doing a much better job than the United States is on this. It's not totaled here, but they are really a year or two ahead of where we are on making regulations. And fortunately, what they regulate then is right now setting the world standard. So we owe some stuff to them. And this is, we all talk about Luddites, but Ted Ludd is probably one of the most misunderstood guys in history. And he was in a weaver, making fabric and things. And they weren't against the technology. They were against the change in their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. They lived in a world with decentralized production, where it was a connection of work, community, family through the guilds, the village, the networks, and townships, and it was stable. You did what your father did, and your kids were going to do what you did. But with the introduction of capitalism and centralized production, all that world went away. And that's what they were fighting against. The exact same thing is beginning to happen now. The world we know now could go away as the means of production are changed by artificial intelligence. We are going to have this same discussion as to what do we value in life? How do we take these new benefits of technology and spread them between more than 5 people, which is exactly what we're at now. So we're going to have some very meaningful political and philosophical discussions on the implication of AI. So organic is your wetware, the power of your mind, the future of biocomputing. Digital is all of that stuff that we talked about with artificial intelligence, and large is the large language model that is the foundation for artificial intelligence. I'd like to make some and this is, I'm in the closing part now. Some recommendations. One of the best news sources that I rely on is something called The Conversation. And it's a free email daily, 10 to 12 articles. They're 4 to 6 minute reads. They're very well done, very unbiased. And you will find, I usually find 2 or 3 of them every day that is worth a deep dive and reading them. I have up a website that I put up 7 years ago about a post-singularity society. Now, this would be a society on the other side of the singularity. And it's at http://epic.land. And if you want to know more of what my thoughts are and some far out things that'll certainly short out a few synapses, check it out. I would also encourage you to sign up and use Gemini, which is the Google chatbot. It's, I think, still free to sign up for it. The difference between a chatbot and the Google search engine is that the Google search engine will give you a whole list of websites. And they're pretty good, but you got to go into them and do something. Today, I could go into Gemini and I said, tell me in feet how high a stack of 100 million CDs is. And in about 3 seconds, I got all the calculations and it told me about 100 miles. So it gets you a specific answer to a specific question. So using the two in combination is a very powerful force, because Gemini, if you're looking for some ideas on something, it will give them to you. Then you can go into Google search, get more details down to the other websites. But between the two of them, it's you need to get your skills up. This is the coming skill set that you need to have. And then OpenAI, if you want to make some fun pictures, DALL-E 2 is one of those that is a lot of fun to do. I'll let you finish your pictures and,
We can remind them though, that these are going to be posted on the web.
oh,
And so you can get these and download them yourself later.
so yeah, post it on the web and get these and download. Yeah. So, so with that, we are at the end and now questions and comments.
What is it?
Great question. And the question is, what really is it is like in semiconductors and things like, it is exactly semiconductors that they're using, and they're using when I started out in the semiconductor industry in 1972, we were making them on wafers that big, and the chips were about that big. And today the chips are still about that big, but can do 100,000 to 1,000,000 times what our chip did on this wafer. And the wafer is this big. And often it is totally interconnected with all the chips on. That's what NVIDIA does. They make really big things that are very, very small, like 5 nanometers, which are really, really tiny things with thousands and thousands of wiring connections on them. So that's the technology that's behind it all.
Hey, a follow-up real quick, Bill, because you talked about in the beginning, DNA. And, like a connection with these silicon, chips and whatnot. That kind of scared me in a sense, but it's far off in the future. But some countries are doing it, maybe not this country, I don't know.
Well, it is the connection with DNA and digital. That's what I talk about in my website, epic.land, is that I describe it's a speculative fiction, which means science fiction, on a post-singularity society. And I'm not there to be right or wrong. I'm there to cause you to think and wonder about these things and pay attention to certain things. But in my world of the Epicesians, we have developed through DNA and understanding how the mind works, the capability to add another layer to the neocortex, which then becomes Bluetooth compatible. So you as a human can communicate with the cloud without any hardware in between. So,
So coincidentally, yesterday and today, I was at meetings with Jay Inslee, talking with tribes about green energy. And the tribes are pushing back and saying, why are you making us develop all this new energy on our land? Put it somewhere else. And Inslee was saying, we have to double the means of production within the next 5 years. So everything that Washington has right now, we have to double, we have to create the infrastructure for it, either green or otherwise within the next 5 years. This leads me, and then we had the 3 Mile Island news article today. It leads me to wonder if the means of energy production is gonna make this gap between the super, super wealthy and the regular citizens grow even wider. Meta wants to drill to the core of the earth now to get more energy, and Bill Gates is buying up 3 Mile Island. And this is where regulation is going to have to catch up as we fall into the valley of the shadow of death, or whatever you call it.
it's a little hard for me to paraphrase that.
Say she's asking about where is energy production going? If we need so much energy, how are we going to get that? And are we going to take it from the poorer people and give it to the rich?
Or the richer people are going to usurp it and take it. And then what do we do?
Ned Ludd. This is exactly the discussion that I was talking about. It's what's going to come is, do the Gates and Bezos and Musk all get it, or what's the way to allocate the benefits of this technology, and who should have the ownership of it? Big questions. It's going to get worse. And it's interesting because to me, the indigenous people are so far ahead on this. I mean, they've understood this for 1,000 years of the relationship of us to the land. And now we're going back to them, but we're telling them what to do rather than listening to their wisdom. Because they got it right for 10,000 years. And we haven't done very well in the last 300 years, so.
It's almost like petro to electron economy.
I'm sorry?
What the power from oil, petrol
Oh,
versus electron generated either fossil fuel or economy.
I'm gonna ask two things. Can you stand in the front there? And then there's another person over
Oh.
there. After you. I didn't understand your question, but, should we go on?
Oh, yeah.
Did you
Go
understand?
ahead, it's probably.
Okay.
Ted.
And I guess my question is, what today do we get out of this? Because I've talked to people, I've talked to someone at Microsoft who, when they were coming out with their program about 6 months ago, said what this does, what their program does, is it can take 1,500 emails and in 1 to 2 seconds, summarize them all so you don't have to read 1,500 emails and just give you the 10 points you need to deal with, which is a tremendous time saver. I also know lawyers who have had ChatGPT write briefs for them that made up case law. Didn't exist.
Right,
And judges have sanctioned them.
right.
So I guess the question is, where does this technology, what does it do for us today? I know what I think there are things it can do. It's like if you have medical records, it can summarize medical records in a couple of minutes. Thousands of pages of medical records. But I think for most people, it's a limited benefit at this moment.
It's 2 years old.
I know. I know.
So you're criticizing a 2-year-old chat or child that is just learning what it can do.
Well, I think people are trying to miss.
Well, they are, and that bothers me because somebody will put in some crazy prompt and say, oh, look how stupid that answer is. Well, let's put it in perspective of it's getting better every week. We are not. And it's going to be getting better every month at a much faster rate.
And unfortunately, I think
Um,
it's going to replace a lot of employment.
I would not recommend anybody to go to law school because this is coming after the white collar. That's where the big changes. And
Yes, no, I think that there's going to be, there's going to be at some supervisory level. I think you're still going to need that. But I think that a lot of the,
Actually, it's my job, it's the paralegal job.
exactly, no, it's the paralegal job,
Yeah.
it's not the senior partner.
That's right.
It's the associates that are gonna, I think, be subsumed.
Computers
which-
can't argue before the court, but a computer can tell you everything you need to know about evidence or 10,000 emails.
Exactly, which
Yeah.
means there's gonna be nobody moving up through the ranks
that's right.
to get to that managerial and supervisory level.
That's right.
I have a simple question.
Yes,
A
sir.
Simple question, practical question. What would happen if a terrorist blew up one of these warehouses with all these million servers? Is
They're
there
all-
backups everywhere?
Yeah, they are. They're backed up all over the world. So that is not a problem. And the joke is in these are called lights. A lot of them are lights out farms because there's no humans needed inside. And the joke is they only need to have 2 employees. One's a guy and one's a dog. And the guy is there to walk the dog and to feed the dog. And the dog is there to make sure the guy doesn't touch anything.
There's a question here. She's like.
I think this has been brought up a little bit, but I'm thinking about all the programmers and people like that. There's no need for them anymore. I mean, what about jobs?
Artificial intelligence does a surprisingly good job of programming. And So there is a tremendous shift going on right now of unemployed programmers. So I think that's another field that is going to be very susceptible to it. Because it can teach itself how to program even better as it gets better.
There's a couple of questions here in the chat. And you've already touched upon one, which is the energy demands. You've said that one. And the benefits in medicine, you've also touched on a little bit. I know that then reading things like CT scans or breast mammograms, those are, want to say anything about those? They can do, the AI can do that better than a doctor can. Like radiology might be one of them.
Well, it can see things that are not normally seen by humans, but there is where a real partnership, I think, that it'll make the radiologist much more effective and the job a lot more enjoyable than what it is now.
I want to say also, he's going to post all of this will be posted, but also you can put any extra resources on our web. And they will be listed, like your books that you mentioned, things like that.
Yeah.
You can put on the web, and so you guys can look at it. Are there any other questions? One more.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, would you name that book again about the singularity, the one you recommended?
The singularity is nearer.
And I've got,
By.
Ray Kurzweil.
Thank
and it will be on the web, so you can look at it again.
Ray Kurzweil was, he's a child prodigy, and I don't know if you remember What's My Line? Yeah, you almost look too young for What's My Line. Yeah, but anyway, he was on there at 16, and he invented a software that could write music. So that's where he started. He went on to found a whole bunch of other companies. He's been the head of Google X, which is their moonshot kind of things. And in his book, The Singularity is Near, written 15 years ago, one of his objectives was to be able to talk to his father, who had died when he was very young. But his father was a concert conductor. Yeah, thank you. And wrote music and things like that. And so had boxes and boxes of stuff. Well, Ray has fed all of those in to a chat bot and now can talk to his father. So in 15 years, he accomplished what I thought was nuts back then. Okay.
Dr. Sams, thank you very, very much.